Call roll call. Okay.
Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Falmetzger said he was excused. Mr. Gifford?
Here.
Mr. Jessic? Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. LaSalle?
Here.
Mr. McEnroth?
Here.
Mr. Mahoney?
Here.
Mr. Meyer?
Okay. Next thing is approval of minutes.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
On the last page, section C in the Public Works Report says, because of the length of the meeting, John Lewis agreed to send out an email containing an update on the items listed in the report. Did I miss getting that?
The email did go out. Lisa prepared that. We can verify, Bob, if you were on that send list. If you weren't, I apologize for that because I'm the one who gave Lisa the list of members.
Yeah.
We'll verify before we leave this evening, and if you hadn't received it, I'll make sure that you get it first thing in the morning.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know that I got it.
I don't know that I got it.
Oops. Something didn't work.
I know Lisa sent it out, so we need to validate what email address she has. I know we received it.
No bounce backs.
Yeah.
Well, I receive emails from Kathy all the time, so
Okay.
it should be correct.
Although that has nothing to
Well,
do
not
with
all the
the
time,
minutes.
but you notify me.
Did you get it?
Okay. We need to validate what email addresses Lisa has. She sent it out about 4 days after the actual
Gave it out to all the other people.
last meeting.
Possible I missed it, so.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
In the spam folder.
Any more questions about the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes of March 18th, 2014 with the suggested changes.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, let's move on.
I'll abstain since I wasn't there.
Pardon?
I'll abstain.
Okay, one abstention. Minutes. Agenda analysis, anything? Citizen comments? New business discuss.
Thank you, Jim.
Looks like it's the Leland Myers Road corridor plan.
Oh, where do we ask for things for future agendas? Is that on the end there? Future, okay, number 7. Got it.
Okay. So,
All right, so if we're on, are we on
5A.
item A?
5A.
Okay. So we have been working on the Lynn Avenue, Leland Road, Myers Road corridor plan, mostly collecting information, having some internal meetings. John Burrell's been to, I think, 4 or 5 neighborhood meetings. This corridor covers a lot of territory. And so we've just kind of been reaching out, letting people know that we're doing a corridor study. And now we're just starting to see some of the results in terms of just how to put that information together, how to share it with the community so that we can get some real feedback from the community. And so we thought we'd share it with you kind of first, because most of what we've been doing at the neighborhood meetings is just letting them know that we're doing a corridor study and telling them where that corridor is. And now we're looking more at kind of some of the deliverables. And so we've hired Wallace Engineering to do the corridor study. We've got David Brokaw, who's leading the project for Wallace, and Jane Wallace, who is active as well. So we've been meeting with both of them, and they've been kind of sharing their ideas and thoughts on the corridor. And now we're kind of looking to you for some direction on whether you think the kind of questions we're asking the neighborhood makes sense. If you like the boards and presentation materials that we're sharing, we're probably going to do a web survey that would allow anybody who's interested to go in and answer a few questions. We're looking at the corridor. We're also looking at some areas off the corridor. So some of the questions that they had were more related to those off the corridor kind of things, like, do we need sidewalks in the Park Place neighborhood? Or do people feel comfortable walking around those areas and just maybe want some better direction on how to get to and from places? Or do sharrows work? Do people pay attention to sharrows. So anyway, we'll go through it. Dave and Jane have some materials to just go through, and we need the screen to do that, Kathy. And
David, what's your last name?
I need to make sure 3 is on. You know what? I think it was already on. That's why it was so dark. So,
I think Jane was stuck in traffic.
It was insane. It was long. I apologize for being late.
It's ironic. Traffic committee.
Traffic committee meeting. Yeah.
It's transportation, not traffic.
That's true.
Clarify.
Difference.
Well, I've prepared a relatively informal presentation, mostly to kind of gauge your guys, get feedback from you guys on what we've prepared so far and what we've analyzed in the corridor. Just starting with what we're looking at right now, the vicinity map shows the corridor. We've broken it into 4 segments. Kind of.
Oh, turn your mic. Oh, not on. Yes. Mine's on, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, we've broken the corridor into 4 segments, kind of related to the topography and the characteristics of each segment. Starting with Lynn Avenue from Jackson to Park Drive as the first segment, then continuing on Lynn from Park Drive to Warner Milne. The following segment would be Leland Avenue to Myers Road, and then Myers Road to Moccasin Way. So the first thing we kind of looked at was just do an inventory of the facilities within the corridor. This corridor in particular has a severe deficiency in sidewalks. The screen you're looking at here, the orange lines depict where there is existing sidewalk width throughout the corridor, and the blue lines are what is designated as bike lanes. And you can see that it's spotty throughout the corridor, and we've kind of identified a lot of those areas where we need sidewalks. We went and walked the site and taken a look at a lot of things, identified areas where we need bike lanes, and looked at the nature of the road throughout the corridor. We've also looked at the TriMet facilities within the corridor, where the bus stops are, and how that serves the public, and we're going to look into how we can facilitate better bus service for the members of this community. We've taken a look at areas also outside the corridor itself, as John mentioned, looking at the parks and the connectivity. We've identified a number of what we would call attractors for multimodal facilities, the schools, the churches, county buildings, located places where people want to go. So from that, we've identified a number of major concerns within the corridor. Obviously, the limited connectivity, the discontinuous sidewalks and bike lanes. We also flagged a number of pedestrian ramps that are non-ADA compliant, a lot of driveways that are in the sidewalk path that create non-ADA cross slopes, and also some excessive block lengths without pedestrian crossing facilities. One of the other major concerns that we looked at was safety. We downloaded ODOT. ODOT does the traffic. They track all the crash studies for Oregon City, and say they provided us with a history of crashes for this corridor in particular. We looked at the crashes and pulled out a few specific locations that had some severe issues. Sorry,
I was just going to say the picture up there is Electric Avenue, just for clarification, that one with the car. So that was why we included that.
Right. So yes, sir.
Excuse me, regarding the crashes,
Yeah.
do you know what types of crashes they are? Because
We do. That
police chief
comes
is
with the
mostly
data.
concerned about rear ends.
Well, there's actually a variety of crashes that occur in certain locations, and the type of crashes are indicative of different types of issues. The ones that we flagged, the Lynn Avenue and 3rd is actually related to the geometry. There's some sideswipe issues. There's some impacts in adjacent facilities, and that kind of is more indicative of geometry issues. Similarly, Lynn Avenue and Electric is at the end of an S-curve, and that's related to some geometry. There's some additional sideswipe accidents. The other one that jumped out at us was Lynn Avenue and A.V. Davis Ethel.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a two-way stop-controlled intersection, and that has a lot of turning, movement, impacts, and
Rear ends.
and
too.
rear ends
Yeah.
as well.
brought that up.
And we went and took a look at that particular intersection and found that there's a lot of, or there's some hindrances to sight distance, specifically for vehicles coming off of A.V. Davis, turning either left or right onto Lynn Avenue. Looking right, there's a series of hedges there, and then a series of tall trees, both of which obstruct the view as you move forward to where you want to get into the intersection. And you're clear at that point looking left, but then as you inch forward again, the trees to the left start to come together and block the view going that direction. So
are there plans for landscaping adjustments in this quarter review?
At this point, we haven't gone through and gotten specific improvements detailed. We're still in kind of identification and draft corridor and looking at improvements that we could do. We'll certainly flag landscape improvements as something that we would want to look at.
We've gone through and generally identified fixes. That one in particular is challenging because you don't really want to be cutting heritage trees, so there are other things we looked at.
Right.
But some of those, of course, are specific design questions.
A question, have you identified A.V. Davis as a shortcut route?
Not particularly a shortcut route.
For pedestrians or vehicles?
For vehicles?
For vehicles.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It's a shortcut over to Warner Parrott and South End Road area.
Through Telford,
Because it
right?
avoids that Mount Pleasant intersection.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. It didn't jump out at us within the documents that we looked at, but yeah, we'll certainly take a look at that.
Yeah, we were also kind of focusing on
Yeah,
safety,
but that's
but
one
that's
of
a
the
good
reasons why there might be
operational.
more traffic through that intersection, making that corner.
Okay.
It is also that A.V. Davis Ethel is the route to the school.
Right.
Yeah, so which makes it particularly appealing as a shortcut.
We also kind of looked at the pedestrian bicycle safety. Obviously, without the facilities there's a lot of hazards for pedestrians walking in the roadway. You get out to Myers Road, there's no shoulder, there's no space, there's a very deep ditch right adjacent to the roadway there. So there's a lot of hazards for pedestrians walking and bikes as well going up and down this road. One of the other things we were considering and looking at was some of the stormwater impacts. This picture in particular was in Singer Creek, and we've noticed that there's some channelization and some incision going on in some of your stream channels. And that's more likely related to the fact you've got more impervious area, more stormwater, flowing to these creeks and streams, and it's kind of cutting away at the channel. So one of the things that we're going to look at as part of our corridor study is identifying ways in which we can, one, enhance water quality through stormwater treatment facilities as we improve the roadway. We'll look for opportunities to add detention facilities to kind of lessen the impact of some of the peak storms that come through, and then also kind of address any erosion issues that we flag. And then the other challenge to this particular roadway is some of the topographic and right-of-way constraints, specifically in segment 1 as it comes up and winds up the hill. It's very tight through there. There's walls on the western side, steep slopes on both sides. So
That's Lynn Avenue.
that's Lynn Avenue.
Park,
Sorry,
yeah.
from
Yeah.
Jack from 5th to Park. That segment there.
At one point on Singer Creek, the Lynn Avenue, where it borders Singer Creek below the park,
Right.
both sides are on walls. This road is actually on a degrading bulkhead.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are a lot of walls. There's some. It's definitely steep.
It will certainly be a challenge
Yeah.
to do anything, and we try to limit. We want to look at not doing widening through these areas to any large degree. So it moves on to kind of the format of developing our concept, our corridor plan. Ideally, we want to look at the priorities specifically around these major concerns. And look for ways that we can kind of address those concerns. We wanted to go through and identify areas that the street doesn't meet the current city standards, and also look at the master plan documents, the transportation TSP, and the trails plan, and see ways to incorporate the project that they've identified in those plans. And then also, obviously, design something or look at ways to incorporate something that fits into the constraints that are there, the right-of-way, the steep slopes, to kind of contain costs of improvements as we go through. So first and foremost, looking at the priorities of the corridor, we want to provide a multimodal route throughout the corridor for bikes and peds and obviously vehicles still. Improve connectivity and access. As we'll get to later slides where we talk about some of the trails that just kind of stop and start, sidewalks that stop and start, and this includes some of the neighborhood outside of the corridor as well. And then improving safety, identifying those areas that are unsafe for all users, and obviously address stormwater issues as well. So our draft concept plan again follows these 4 segments, and the following slides kind of break out by segment things that we're looking at and ways to kind of enhance the corridor and provide for the facilities that we see that the corridor needs. So the first segment, segment 1, looking at the bottom of the screen, we've got 2 alternative cross sections that we're kind of weighing the value between. Alternative A incorporates a shared use path for the uphill direction. 10 to 12 foot, ideally 12 foot would be better. 2 11 or 12 foot travel lanes, and a widened shoulder going downhill for use of bikes and peds. The advantages of the shared use path is that it accommodates a wide variety of bicycle users. You could have young kids potentially riding their bikes on there who wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable taking the lane in the street. Conversely, alternative B provides for sidewalks on both sides and a climbing bike lane for vehicles traveling southbound on Lynn Avenue.
Oh, and just to preface that, and I don't know how familiar everybody is with this, but Lynn Avenue, this first portion of it, as you can see, we kind of outlined what has facilities and what doesn't. The red is stuff that we were proposing because there isn't any existing sidewalk and bike lanes. So as we go through that image in the upper left-hand corner will kind of give you a sense of obviously where we're proposing improvements. We're not putting in new stuff over existing stuff, unless
Right. The intention is to match with what's existing out there, and provide facilities where they're needed.
So,
we've also identified at the top of the screen some specific improvements that we think may be warranted to address some of the specific safety concerns in the corridor. We've also flagged some of the items within the TSP and the Trails Plan improvements that they've noted within this corridor.
And the sewer plan, but you guys don't care about that, I don't think, right? The sewer plan.
The sewer plan. We have a sewer master plan. So we want to flag that within this concept, within our corridor plan, so as we come through this corridor in that segment, people are aware that there's sewer improvements that need to happen at the same time. So starting from 5th and Jackson, moving up, that first corner it's what's Lynn and 3rd, although 3rd does not intersect with Lynn. It's a very tight corner, and that's one of the issues that's been flagged as a hazard on ODOT's crash data. We want to look for opportunities to increase the curve radius there and make it a little bit of a smoother transition. It will be a challenge, but I think there's some opportunity there. Moving up, we saw that there was an opportunity to realign Pearl Street to tee it in opposite of Oak Street. Right now there's an offset intersection which creates some hazards for vehicles turning across each other. And there's a flat spot right next to Pearl that would make that doable. So we wanted to put that into our potential corridor development plan. The TSP flagged a location for an activated pedestrian signal at Sharman Street, so we've located that in here. One of the other things that we're considering as part of this is the potential closure of Electric Street. Right now, Electric Street has some real wide radiuses coming into it. It's right in the middle of the S-curve. It is on ODOT's crash list as a high crash location. And it doesn't really go anywhere. There's no houses served off of Electric. It just connects to Sharman down the street, and it's very close to Sharman. So there's some issues with the proximity of the two intersections together, and we didn't see the need for it, especially with the crash history that it had. In talking to John Lewis, we thought that we could incorporate maybe a left turn lane into Charmin Street to allow for vehicles to stack and turn into Charmin without blocking downhill traffic at that S curve. So people wouldn't have to do any hard braking at that point. And then another TSP was the Lynn Avenue speed warning system. They want to put radar gun and automatic speed sign there.
Oh, and the,
Can we
Oh,
go?
sorry.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, this is a good time to comment.
Yeah.
So I know William's got a question, but one other piece I wanted to. So the two alternatives. So there's a variety of questions here. I mean, this electric avenue. We're not proposing. We think those are questions or that we need to kind of work through and kind of get feedback from the community. Pearl Street and the alignment there. But the big question is alternative A versus alternative B, and I think the other thing to point out about alternative B, and maybe it might help in this detail for the future. So in alternative B, in the lane that's basically driving away from us, so where the white pickup truck is, I think, is a share, right? That would be a shared.
That would be, the bicycles would take the lane going downhill in that
We
situation.
should add a Shero so that's clarified.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can clarify.
So the idea there would be we wouldn't stripe a bicycle lane. It would just be that bicycles would go with the flow of traffic there, which would be uncomfortable for some, especially children. But so when I think about preferences, and I like the alternative A a little bit better than I like the alternative B, but that's my preference.
What's the cost difference? I mean, per linear foot of this section versus the other section.
I think there was a
You're
significant
essentially
cost
talking
difference.
about the same traveled width. I don't know if you noticed there's a lot of detail on this, but there's 40 feet on either side. So really, it's relatively similar because you're not most of the cost associated with that width would be with retaining walls. So you're essentially talking about the difference between two concrete sidewalks and a very wide concrete sidewalk that's roughly double the amount of having two and pavement width. So there's not really any difference in cost, I guess, if that answers your question. That's really one way or the other on this one in particular.
Yeah.
So.
Sorry.
Well, one of my questions was the cost difference. Thanks for asking that one. Second question, because bikes can go down that hill, I mean, adult cyclists go down that hill easily as fast as the cars do.
Yeah, we
faster.
saw them.
Yeah, sometimes faster, sometimes faster. What is the triple line down the middle of these?
Oh, so what this was trying to incorporate was the fact that this has the potential to shift the center line a little bit. And so that is the existing center line location, and then the double yellow is the proposed center line location. So that kind of represents, where we have crown sections, there's going to be some additional extra work to kind of make the crowns fit to the center line, and so it's going to be pushing the roadway over slightly.
So on alternative A, is this on the right-hand side? That's a bike lane?
Well, we don't call it a bike lane. We're calling it kind of a widened shoulder in this, but it would be for use of pedestrians and cyclists.
But it's not designated.
But it's
so
not
you
designated.
can't really stripe it as a bike lane. That's the difficulty
So
with
slow
that.
bikes could take it, and adult cyclists would probably just use the
Probably just use the lane.
lane.
Yeah.
And
I'd rather see a bike lane going uphill more than
oh, absolutely,
downhill.
absolutely,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
A lot of people just can't make that hill; they've got to walk it up.
But I mean, the speeds that somebody's climbing up the hill, that would work. You could integrate them easily into that alternative A, being on that shared path.
Right.
Most
They're not
bikers,
racing.
most bikers get off their bike in front of my house and walk from there.
So one other thing that Kathy just asked me, which I think is a good clarification, both of these alternative sections those are sections, just for those of you that don't know, we call those sections. Both of them are as if you are looking downhill.
Correct.
North down, right,
Yeah.
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 I assumed that.
I have a question about the sections. Have you guys done any rudimentary off of aerials, cross sections through various places there?
Make sure that
We
things
have,
fit.
like in plan view, to kind of run those cross sections through.
Well,
Yes.
in this most of this area we're talking about, your alternative A and B retaining walls are nowhere near appropriate for the land that's there.
Right, there is some geologic hazard for a lot of this. Now, it's not the entire corridor that's going to be a problem.
Not the
and-
entire corridor, but there is places where you'll have 15 to 20 foot walls on both sides.
Well, if we were widening out to some.
No, if you're using existing, because they're there now.
Is they're there now?
Yeah, there
Oh,
are there now. Yeah, that's well. There is. There. Are you talking about where it transitions from just
From
before Fourth?
From 7th to Lynn Avenue in that corner and just above.
7th to Lynn
I mean,
Avenue?
I'm sorry, from 5th to Lynn.
Okay, I'm
the-
sorry.
is
Yeah,
that the
that
barrier?
in
one.
that
Yes.
corner, in that
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a given. That one's extremely
And
steep.
just above the houses at the end of 5th Street,
right.
that on
That
the Singer
one's-
Creek side, there's about 15 foot vertical drop.
It drops. Yeah.
Yeah, at this point, we didn't look into retrofitting or reconstructing any existing walls. Our plan is to kind of, I mean, in those sections in particular, I believe we're within the existing roadway.
Yeah, but the existing roadway is too narrow anyway.
Oh yes, of course it is, and that's why we're doing relatively constrained paths through here.
I mean, they're less than what you're showing.
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
We-
we're aware of that.
Yeah, we're aware of that.
It's just so that's why we're trying to keep it as narrow as possible while still
But there's
providing it.
sti-
But yeah.
The point is, there's still reconstruction work
Oh,
that'll be
definitely.
necessary. in
And
that
these,
spot.
I mean, there's reconstruction of retaining walls required in a lot of places
Okay.
for this. Yeah, no,
Gotcha.
that's a given.
And-
They're shown to kind of give you a sense of what's going on topographically, which is steep on this side that way.
Right.
Yeah, but
And,
that's a
and
good point.
I mean, we're envisioning a widening. The widening in some locations is as big as 8 feet is what we've seen, and as little as nothing.
No, nothing, yeah.
And then this wall that we show in here is just a graphical representation of a wall. That would require, obviously, a geotechnical and a structural engineer to look at and evaluate how they're best going to accomplish that. But where we're seeing the wall, just from our rough look at this thing, new walls wouldn't be greater than about 6 feet at this
Typically.
point. Typically.
I have a question about the wall. So
Yeah.
of the Lynn Avenue in this segment, what percentage of that drive needs these kinds of walls?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, we've drawn it out in plan view, so
Right.
you can see where the retaining walls are, and that's based on city GIS contours. So, if going into a specific design, you
Okay,
get more
I
specific.
realize this is.
Oh yeah,
not
oh yeah, but
anywhere
no,
near-
we looked at that, especially to make sure that we weren't going to impact any houses or anything like that.
Well, you can tell me proportionately. I mean, is it
Oh.
like a third of it, a quarter of it? Or?
I think we're looking at maybe a fifth. Maybe less than that. This is purple line in here,
But-
in these locations. So it's not a huge chunk of it, but yeah, there are some areas where we're looking at. I mean, this one in here would be the dangerous one.
It,
If you get down towards
What is
Fourth
the-
Street.
yeah, it's almost all below Pearl Street.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's
Can you
the-
hang that on that wall? Can you pin it on the wall?
One question.
So the intent here is to ground truth the idea of this road section fitting. Obviously not to design the walls,
Right,
figure out wall
obviously.
height, but if there's fatal flaws there, we want to know about them now, right?
Yeah.
I'm
Now,
just
and
suggesting.
the other thing that I think is important for you to understand is that we've heard a lot about speed and concern for speed along this road section. So to me, it's roadway width. We may see lanes that are narrower in some areas, and we're going to see curbs that aren't, that are going to be make that feel more constrained, which to me is a traffic control measure that's going to force most drivers, to obey the law. And also, I think generally you're going to see a speed study that's going to, result in lower speed than what is posted right now, because we've got narrower lanes, we've got a hard curb there instead of just
I certainly hope you're right.
fast shoulders.
Typically, narrower lanes do slow people down, or they perceive
Right.
things to be narrower. So, but of course, there are those grades, and that's difficult.
Except the
to,
lazy people like to cut the corners.
Well, but you
Yeah,
won't
like-
have too many opportunities to cut corners. If
No, but they do.
Yep.
Like you watch a TriMet bus. Is that a TriMet route?
Yes, it is. It's 33.
So they come down, and their TriMet, they'll allow 4 feet on their right side, and then they'll hug the line all the way down the hill.
and they're not gonna hit anything. I don't know why it doesn't know how to drive their bus or something.
Well,
Okay.
If you measured the bus versus the lane width, you'd understand.
Yeah.
Dave, we're going to run out of time if you don't.
Okay, yeah, we'll keep
through
moving
this.
along. Moving on to segment 2. Again, with the top left corner of this drawing, the red is the only section of this corridor, of this segment that's without sidewalk and bike lanes. The rest of it is built out, and so we looked at keeping the existing sidewalk on. If you look at the cross section, the existing sidewalk stays on the left side. On the right side, we enhance with new sidewalk and potentially some integration of stormwater facilities through curb cuts and whatnot there. Does anybody have any questions on segment 2?
Crosswalks, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, yeah, I didn't
Yeah,
get
we
into
should
that
probably
part.
get
So, again, an activated signal to the crossing at Park Drive was flagged in the TSP. At A.B. Davis and Lynn Avenue, the TSP flagged an activated signal to crossing, but I think I might recommend a 4-way stop control for that just because of the sight distance and the vehicular crashes. An activated signal is not going to address the crash history at that point.
And it's just a block away from the 4-way stop at Holmes Lane.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, so it's
it
not going
should
to
be
delay
pointed
traffic
out,
by very
there's
much.
really not that many stops on this for
No.
pretty much a 2-mile corridor. You've got a stop at Holmes, you've got an intersection at Warner Millie, Warner Parrott, and then a stop at Claremont, Leland Myers, and that's all you have the whole corridor, right? That's the only stop you have traveling on the corridor.
No, there's another one about halfway between Claremont and Highway and the Highway.
You roll through it.
Claremont and where?
Yeah, but about halfway between Claremont and Highway and 213.
Oh, it does. Our corridor stops at Moccasin Way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I'm talking. I mean, it's a real
Yeah.
straight shot. So
Yeah,
that
it
makes
is.
no
It is a
sense.
long straight
Yeah,
shot
it's a
with
long
no
straight shot.
stops.
Okay. We also flagged potentially a crosswalk at Hood Street to allow for pedestrians to cross for the school access, and then taking out the mid-block crossing that led to the Pleasant Hill,
Mount Pleasant.
Mount Pleasant
Yeah,
elementary school that's no longer functioning. Yeah.
Quick question on the stormwater facilities and the, what do we call the other one over there? Rain garden. You compute the maintenance cost for those, for people to keep the weeds down and all that kind of stuff, so crews know what that's gonna cost year in and year out?
I mean, we can incorporate that as
I
something
think,
that
yeah, I
understand.
think-
Yeah, that's something that we would do during a cost estimate. Right now, they have the stormwater is being caught with catch basins, and
Yeah,
not
I know
really
that's the
being treated,
trend,
so,
but
yeah.
I just see some of them that have massive maintenance requirements.
They have maintenance requirements.
John, one of the
So-
things that most people don't know is when we add impervious, we're required to find a way to treat it. So a lot of these facilities aren't just there for the beauty of them, they're there for the treatment that goes along
Right.
with them. And because they're special features, even though they're fronting a property owner, so normally it's like, it kind of looks like a planter strip, which would be the property owner's responsibility. Because this has got a stormwater element to it, we're finding that those are more likely going to be managed through Martin's division than something else. And there is a cost.
Right.
If we didn't have to treat the stormwater, we wouldn't probably be proposing those.
And in our current revision that we're making to our stormwater technical manual, this is actually one of the preferred design methods, one of the recommended design alternatives that we utilize internally as well as recommend to developers within the community. So as this would be constructed part of a public project, we would more than likely take it on within our internal maintenance program, and we have several of these that we already maintain.
One question I have with this whole corridor, I see on some of these areas you're going to be kind of near the environmentally sensitive areas. Are you seeing, as part of your study, any impacts to like wetlands? As part of the widening, having to construct retaining walls,
Not necessarily impacting wetlands. I think we will be within buffer in some
Yes.
locations, but not wetlands in particular.
There is one wetland that the corridor passes through, and it's because
That's down in Myers.
Yeah, there's a creek called Mud Creek, and it crosses Myers Road at Moccasin Way, which is just north of Gaffney Lane, just for reference. And that wetland is currently kind of culverted through. So we would be widening, but we would also hopefully be currently, and I don't know how much detail you really want to hear on this, but currently stormwater on Myers and Leland goes through ditches largely, and it's discharged without treatment into the wetland. So our improvement would be widening, adding sidewalk and bike lanes, but also providing a more approved treatment method than ditches for that stormwater. So that's the only impact.
The reason I'm asking you is that, and I'm dealing this myself on a project where we're triggering slopes 5, and for the whole corridor we're having to do the water quality to 2 year, and then we're also having to do flow duration for detention, and it's adding over a couple $1 million on a project. So it's something that if it's not a flaw, fatal flaw, but you should really look into it because your stormwater, what you're showing here, is going to be insufficient.
Yeah, this only addresses stormwater quality. I mean,
Yeah.
if we have detention issues, then we're what we're thinking
we actually
of.
looked at that.
We have
too,
looked at it,
so,
and we're looking for
yeah.
locations to do more like a regional detention facility that would, where you have available land. We've looked at a couple locations near Signorio Park.
They're not on the street, so it's not something we're talking about. But yeah, it is something we addressed and then the environmentally sensitive.
It's something that you guys are legally required to address as part of your responsibilities, your permitting, and so whoever and this isn't a design project at this point. We're just kind of coming up with a corridor plan. But when you get to the point where you're going through a design study, then you have to address the developments that you're creating at that time.
Yeah, I was just trying to advise you, if you're doing this, try to maybe work around those and not impact them, because that's going to have a substantial savings of the project.
Yeah.
That was a task in our scope. So
yeah, at this point, we will certainly flag the locations that would have impacts to those types of facilities.
On these two segments, though, the challenge is just steep slopes, and steep slopes aren't going to be good for any kind of detention. We can still do some level of treatment, but it's kind of like what we ran into when we did Beaver Creek Road, the widening through in front of Nelson's Nautilus and Fred Meyer there. There weren't too many options for any kind of stormwater detention, so we worked with what we could with these roadside swales and called it good. Yeah.
That's maybe fine. This was just a...
Yeah, I get it. We got to keep that in mind. So.
And you're certainly not allowed to use in-creek detention anymore, in-stream detention.
Yeah, well, even that, there's none there. So,
so moving on, segment 3 is very similar to segment 2 in a lot of ways, with the exception of you have a lot more gaps in your sidewalk network on both sides of the street. So we'd be looking to expand those gaps, provide for some stormwater quality facilities where opportunity presents itself, and a couple of locations. The TSP has identified at Warner Milne and Leland Road a roundabout, and we'll talk about the roundabouts a little bit later. A pedestrian activated signal crossing, and I can't read that street name.
Oh, it's Highfield Court.
Highfield Court. We noted some sight distance issues at Pease Road as well. And then again, the cross section is very similar to the previous section too.
My question that I have on this is just my personal preferences. I don't like sidewalks right next to the curb. If at all, I mean, if they're going to go around this way for the detention things, maybe they can all be farther away from the sidewalk.
Yeah, and we actually, considered that as an option to throw in this sketch, which is kind of left it as it is for ease of drafting more than anything. But if you see the right-of-way kind of expands into that landscape section, and there's certainly opportunities to do a detached sidewalk and have a planter strip as opposed to a curb-tight sidewalk. We've kind of shown it curb tight.
Phrases I'm looking for. Curb tight.
Curb tight means the sidewalk is right next sidewalk to the curb, right there.
So
it's
confusing. And we kind of show them mostly curb tight because that's what's there now.
Got it.
And obviously, this green stuff here is kind of conceptually what's outside of your improvements. So the wider you go, the more cost it is. Obviously, we'd like to put stormwater facility all the way down. There are some areas where right-of-way is narrower than what we have required.
Got it.
And, you know, stuff like that. But obviously, detached is more comfortable for everybody.
And finally, segment 4, again, very similar, very similar cross-section we're proposing or looking at through this location. We've also flagged a sanitary sewer expansion. This section of Myers Road where that green line shows up is currently not served by sewer. And so we wanted to flag that within our corridor plan as something to be aware of.
I've got a question about sewer.
Yeah.
If you have to design the sewer, can you design the manholes in the middle between the drive so motorcycles they don't have to?
It's like a question
I
for
think-
Eric Walker.
I think that's actually in your guys' standard details is a lot of cities, and I don't remember if Oregon City's
We
one
try
of
to
them.
miss the wheel pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just like, this
Most
Molalla Avenue, it's with a motorcycle.
That's
it's a lot
more
of-
because they moved the lanes and.
I know.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, most city standards require the sanitary to be right in the middle. And there's a lot of other requirements associated with sanitary. It tends to come down to if there's stuff in that road already, specifically if there's water lines, you have clearance requirements for the sanitary sewer from the water line. But yeah, ideally,
I
you
hate
put it in the
manhole
center.
covers.
Yeah, be careful.
Don't understand why.
All right. So moving on, this one's it's a little bit hard to read on here, but this is kind of our look at the greater neighborhood area and some of the opportunities for potential routes to connect up the neighborhoods. And one of the things that kind of jumped out at us looking at this thing was that Singer Creek Park is an island to itself. In fact, all the parks are kind of an island to themselves. Don't connect to sidewalks, don't have any parking, don't have wayfinding signs to get people to and from them. And so we looked at ways to kind of connect to and from the park, which we felt was the best way to kind of span a route through the neighborhood. Now, the red lines that are shown up on here are the kind of potential routes that we looked at. Starting at Jackson and 6th, there's an existing stairway that goes up there. It's relatively steep, but it was hard to find. I ended up coming down 6th, and you couldn't see it past the trees. It wasn't lit. It wasn't signed. And there's no sidewalk connecting to it at the top. So that was one thing that would be advantageous.
And it's a fun climb.
Yeah, it's a fun climb. So connecting that stairway up would provide, it's not an accessible route, but it would be a potential route for pedestrians. And then we noticed between Home Street and B Street is kind of an apartment complex street.
Use your pointer on that, can you?
Yeah.
Sorry, right in here. There's a desire path, which is kind of like people have worn a path between. There's a gate at the back end of their property to Home Street, and so there's an opportunity and the city owns this wedge of property in here, so there's an opportunity to pave that path and make a connection if you can obtain easements from the apartment complex, and that would kind of bridge the gap between Pearl Street and this preschool area over here. Again, we looked at from Pearl Street, there was an opportunity. The city owns a little sliver of property here, and the grades seem amenable to a path. And then there was a segment of privately owned property that you could potentially get a path across. Again, there was another opportunity. The Singer Creek has a path that kind of ends abruptly, at this location.
I should explain the line types.
Yeah, sorry.
Starting from the beginning.
From the beginning.
From the beginning, looking at this, the solid lines are all existing.
The solid lines are the existing sidewalks and paths. The red lines are the potential routes that we've kind of identified. The orange lines are trails or trail routes identified in the trail master plan.
Yeah.
And the blue are routes that are identified in the TSP. So, yes, going back to this, there's potential for connectivity from Pearl Street to the park in these two different routes, connecting to the trail here or connecting to the trail at that location. Coming from Sumner Street in this neighborhood up here, there's also a Desire path that kind of routes down the hill. Like they've cut a little 1-foot trail that connects into the park. So connecting that up with some kind of trail would provide connectivity for the neighborhood to get into the park and get down to this neighborhood if they wanted to. At this point, they'd have to go back out to Malala to get down and around. At Dimmick Court and the end of, I forget what street this one was, I think Caesar, it's just separated by a fence and the guy's private property, so there seemed to be an opportunity to get an easement across his property to provide some neighborhood connectivity to get through there, which would allow this neighborhood to have easier access to the school if they needed to, and back and forth. And then extending the sidewalks up Caesar to where it ends right here.
Hey, Dave, maybe rather than go through each one of these, because there's several and we're going to kind of lose time here.
Yep.
The main objective here is to help with more connectivity between some of these destination locations. Definitely try to help facilitate neighborhood traffic between the school at Gardner and the corridor. Trying to figure out, I mean, Lynn Avenue, the TSP really kind of shows a different kind of project as opposed to trying to put people on Lynn, but yet we've heard from others that they'd rather see them on Lynn and at least see what this, whether or not it could be accommodated and at what cost it could happen. So all these little connectivity pieces are kind of unique and could happen, within or outside the scope of the corridor project. But I think looking at all of them in this kind of context is going to be pretty helpful to help us prioritize. It may be that this segment of Lynn is just too far expensive for us to be able to accommodate, but a lot of these small neighborhood connections may be affordable and manageable. And the part of the input that we'd like to get from the community is, where's our sense of priority with some of these things, and we're trying to formulate how to kind of gather that information and if you have thoughts on that, we'd be good to hear them rather than kind of thinking about each individual path. And whether or not it makes sense. That's going to be something we're hoping to get from as we move through the process. But so we could probably move to the next one.
Okay, we'll move on. And we did a similar look at the areas around Gardner Middle School and identified a number of impediments to mobility through there, lack of sidewalks. There's a number of fences that are right on the middle school property that are blocking access that we looked at, and some lack of ramps and connectivity issues in there. Do you have any questions on either one of those slides? And then finally, getting into the roundabout, the TSP had identified a option for a roundabout at Warner Milne and Lynn Avenue. And so we've gone and looked at refining how that's going to look and the impacts to the neighboring properties for two different concepts. One would be a 5-leg roundabout as shown here, and then a 4-leg roundabout that has a separate spur to Central Point Road. And the drawings are kind of lacking in detail at this point, but just kind of are here to show what impacts to the neighboring properties there are. The blue lines on these drawings are the existing right-of-way, and the hatch, the kind of gray hatch, is sidewalk and roadway that we are anticipating would be needed to fit those roundabouts in there.
So
just kind of
the key
float.
difference between them.
Why don't you use your pointer to show the sidewalk differences and the crosswalk opportunities versus...
Yeah. So the sidewalk is this gray hatch that kind of wraps around and ties in. The crosswalks would be prior to the legs. They're usually about 20 feet off the roundabout themselves, depending on truck traffic. But so pedestrians and bicyclists would not go through the roundabout, but would be routed. Like bicyclists would have bike lanes coming up, exit the paved area prior to the roundabout, and continue on a shared use path through to where they could cross the roundabout at the given locations, or enter back into the roadway beyond the roundabout, in these types of locations.
Isn't this similar to the discussion we had last meeting about the intersection up on
David,
South End Road,
pointer isn't worth crap.
and where the crossing was so far back from the intersection that the cars were running over the pedestrians to get out to see the cross traffic.
I don't think it's similar. I know what you're talking about, but I don't see it as similar, no.
Well, the yield would be, for the vehicles, would be up around the circle itself, would it not?
Typically, with roundabouts, the yield line is up near the circle, but you allow for one vehicle stacked between the yield line and the crosswalk is typical for roundabouts.
Which was the same situation that we were seeing at the other intersection.
Okay. Yeah, to me, they're different.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
In any case, these are conceptual.
Mhm.
I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, not that it's not an important issue. And I think, and I don't know, you probably are fairly familiar with the whole TSB, but the TSB went through and looked at conditions in 2035 and said, what's going to happen to this intersection?
It's going to hell.
It didn't look good. So they said, well, what do we do if we put in a roundabout? And so that's why we went through and took those basic preliminary traffic analysis with the two roundabouts and just refined them for a 4-leg and a 5-leg. But
So did you have a preference between the 4 and the 5?
My personal preference is the 5-leg roundabout. With the 4-leg wrong way. The 4-leg roundabout, I didn't like this turn movement into Central Point. Vehicles have to. This is currently, with what we've got, this is going to be a 2-lane roundabout going through, and so we'd have vehicles coming in.
Oh, that's nasty.
Off of the roundabout to stack to turn onto Central Point.
Yeah.
And there's potential that it didn't predict having. It predicted that we have enough storage based on the study in the TSP, but I just feel semi-uncomfortable with having a stacking location that close to the roundabout, because as vehicles, if they stack into a roundabout, that causes all kinds of havoc.
Go back to the other one.
Yeah, that's essentially the situation we got today.
Yeah,
But of course-
there was a complaint about that a couple meetings ago.
Exactly.
there are additional, you need more right-of-way to do the 5-leg. So
Yeah,
you
the
end up
5
taking more private property to
Well,
do
fortunately, we just bought that whole. Or
Yeah,
we're
the
going
city,
to be buying.
city owns
Yeah.
this property,
Not Pleasant, yeah.
and that was the intent of. I mean, roundabouts have a lot of flexibility with how you locate the center of the roundabout, and we've pushed this one, in this direction to try and minimize impact and right-of-way requirements for the apartment property and this other private property as well. So kind of just driving the roundabout that direction to limit right-of-way purchase that would be required for this.
What's the size of this roundabout in comparison to the one off the 213 and
The jug handle.
Jog Handle project?
I'm not familiar with it.
The 213 jug handle? Yeah, I don't know.
Well, the
That's-
jug handle for one is just a
pretty
single lane
big.
roundabout. This is a
No,
2-lane.
there's
This
a
is a
pretty-
2-lane
there's a
roundabout,
two-lane.
and the speeds are much smaller. I'm sorry, slower. All tired. Right, because you've got, I think Warner Milne is 25 or 30? 30?
Speeds are relatively the same.
Are
on
they
the
similar?
roundabout at the other one, but
Are
that's
they-
a single lane
But the
roundabout.
intersecting roads are?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I mean, there are, and I have, I'd like to go back. If we got into design on this thing, I would like to go back to the traffic consultant and verify some of the numbers. Double lane roundabouts create a lot of conflict points and a lot of hazards. They're a lot more challenging for drivers to negotiate than single lane roundabouts. So, if we could remove some of these, the double stacks on some of these streets, that would be preferable. And that would ease kind of the process of negotiating the roundabout for a lot of people. But that's something that would have to go through, when they get to the specific design stage of this thing, to see if you could.
Significant advantage to 2-lane roundabouts.
The advantage to 2-lane roundabouts,
Especially on longer, on a 5-leg.
The advantage is capacity.
Yeah.
It has greater capacity.
I see people
but it's
even
all
on that
weaving.
one on jog handle like completely confused. I mean, they're just sitting there and not engaging into the roundabout. Like.
Take a learning curve, that's all.
Well, I know, but that has been going on now where.
That's why they're behind them. Somebody gives them homework.
Yeah, roundabouts are, especially in new locations and where people are unfamiliar with them, can be a challenge. And they're, public relations issues for sure. We've had some issues come up on projects that we worked on, that we proposed a roundabout and, didn't work out.
And then they got one anyhow.
Yeah.
Well, people get confused from a four-way stop
Yeah,
intersection
exactly.
too, so no matter what you do, you're gonna get confused.
Good point.
Just a quick comment. I know that John's concerned about the time too, but the state of Indiana, where the stoplight was invented, is on a very vigorous, aggressive program to remove every stoplight in the state and replace it with a roundabout. Because the deaths have gone down, the accident rates have gone down, the environmental impact of not having all those engines idling at a stop sign is just. I would vote for a roundabout hands down at any opportunity.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree. Mhm.
France gets away with it.
And that's the end of my presentation. So do we want to talk a little bit about the questionnaire at this point, or do you want to just?
Yeah, I think Jane, we had a conversation about questions that we might post on a survey, keeping the survey short and to the point, trying to figure out what would work, what hasn't. And this list that we've handed out is really a draft list of ideas that we had, that we kind of came up with, or you came up with, but we talked about and said, well, what would work and how would we get input, specifically some of those off the corridor kinds of connections as to, and the question like, do we need sidewalks in a neighborhood that hasn't been without sidewalks for 50 years, and or if you're talking Rivercrest neighborhood, does that make sense to have sidewalks up there, or can you have maybe Sharrows or something different, and so trying to get that feedback from the community so that we could. We've probably talked about $10 million worth of stuff here, right? So we're not gonna. I don't see us getting a $10 million check. So how do we prioritize? Because from our perspective, I think the highest priority might be the roundabout at the intersection. And beyond that, though, it's kind of like, well, I hear a lot of complaints about their first segment there on Lynn Avenue, but that's going to be very expensive. There's going to be expensive solutions there. So, but is there some neighborhood connectivity that might help get kids to the middle school that maybe we ought to prioritize?
I think that's a better investment.
I agree.
Getting
To school.
And I tried to, I think we talked about this, but when I was thinking about, and these questions are super general, I didn't get as specific as I could have, but access to Gardner Middle School, I think it's on page 3. I was thinking it would be great if we could get questions that got answers that would be amenable to getting funding. Because if you specifically ask people, do you guys walk to Gardner? Would, that, and you get a yes, or I need something, then that is a great thing to put in funding apps.
Yeah. So that was kind of the other thing, is we were thinking a little down the road with regard to, well, how could we get grants? What kind of community feedback could we do in advance so that we can share with those that might be reviewing those grant applications, that we're trying to inspire some of that information and get some of that information from the community. So this is very draft. And we haven't even really gotten back together with one another on it. So it may be a little premature, but I think it's important for you to know that we're interested in asking questions that are going to be meaningful and useful for both figuring out what our priorities are and maybe, how the community feels about some of these kind of improvements.
So I think if you asked if they would participate in funding, you don't have to be specific, but maybe there would be a citywide LID and you had prioritized connections for parks and schools, and that was your priority. You may well get the city to buy into it if you put it on the ballot and you get a grant to match the rest of it and make it a short, specific, this is what we intend to do, and then go out and do it.
That's good. That's the kind of feedback.
Have the PTAs
So the end in sight.
looked at or asked about any of this?
We haven't gone to any PTA meetings.
Okay, good. My thought would be, how many of those people are driving their kids to school who would let them walk if there was a safe way to do it?
So you suggest bringing this to the PTA and getting
Well,
them
the
all
school-
to fill it out, maybe?
The school
maybe
part.
maybe
The school
the
part.
question that I
Well,
heard
definitely
was
the district.
if you had a safe route to school, if
Mm-hmm.
your child, if the walking route was pedestrian friendly, would you allow your child to use
Right.
it as opposed to driving them?
As
school?
opposed to driving.
That's probably not just for this corridor. It's for many.
That's what Happy Valley did to get
Right.
our money.
That's right. Thanks, Wayne.
Well, at Holcomb Elementary School, when we were proposing to increase the sidewalks up there along Holcomb, the principal told us that if that went through, they would be able to eliminate 2 full school buses per day. So that's pretty significant. So I'm sure you'd probably get similar reactions.
But then you get 40 private cars.
On Holcomb, did that actually?
If you cut down the cars going to Gardner, you'll cut down the accidents on Lynn.
A.V. Davis and
At
Lynn
A.V.
Ethel and
Davis,
That's a
Landing,
good
yeah.
point. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So anyway, information, not necessarily, I don't think it's premature, but it's pretty early in the process. We're still trying to figure out how to present and how to gather information. We're definitely not interested in making decisions in a vacuum, so appreciate your input. We do have a pretty tight timeline, though, to still get through this. We talked to our brothers and sisters in the planning department, and formal adoption requires planning commission approval. Interestingly enough, a quarter plan like this doesn't require this committee's approval, but it does require us to present to the CIC, and it requires us to present to the planning commission. So my hope is that at some point in time we'll have a motion from this committee to adopt the recommendations, and that would go before the planning commission. And my God, we got to get that planning commission to approve things in something, less than 4 meetings. They seem to trip up over that kind of stuff. So feel free to encourage your planning commissioners to, buy into these.
What did you say about the CIC?
I said we have to take it to the CIC. That's
Why?
Because that's that's one of the requirements for the adoption of corridor plans.
Legislative process.
Yeah, legislative
Yeah.
process, and then planning commission, and then city commission. But unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not sure which, we're bringing it to you just because we love you so much, and we think we need your input.
Well, I
Yay,
would,
John.
from my opinion, I think any good, close, comprehensive look at this corridor is valuable because, to my knowledge, it hasn't been done.
What's the only other corridor? We only got 3 ways to get up on top of the hill.
What, that's part of the overall problem, is that there will always be 3 different ways to get up to the top of the hill,
Not counting 213.
not counting 213.
Yeah.
And anything we can do to look at this on a very long-term basis is positive.
I'm glad that that's valued because it looks very important, walking it on paper.
Yeah, but as you pointed out, if you looked at your neighborhood, your drawings, there's no connection between the middle level and the upper level between Lynn Avenue and
McLaughlin.
Molalla. There's no connection between Molalla and 213. There's no connection between Lynn Avenue and Center, the Hill and South End Road. Those are the only ways to get from off the hill down into town.
And the way
So-
a person rides a bike, Linden Avenue makes more sense because it's just a general climb all the way up. If you go up 7th Street and then, that's pretty steep.
I know of a gentle bike ride up the hill. It goes by the old high school, but it's way out of the way.
Yeah.
So the other thing I didn't mention was John Burrell is our project manager on this, so he's been working with Wallace most closely to move through this. So at some point in time, you'll probably get a follow-up email from John that will direct you, or maybe Kathy, or maybe Lisa. I'm not really sure, but one of us will be getting you. Once we do put together that kind of survey questionnaire, we'll send it to everybody on this committee for sure.
I think if you're going to present this, taking a bridge from the TSP and saying, you know, the TSP was approved, this was a corridor study that was requested, we filed, so they can see that you've been conscientiously planning this and taking step by step, and it ties in there and didn't just come out of the blue.
That's a good idea, John. Really.
Or some darker area than blue.
Is there a way to have an open house on this?
That's actually another requirement.
Is it?
Mm-hmm. But yeah, and so we're planning to do that.
You know, if we could have the response we got from the public on the Legacy project, you know, that citizen participation, that'd be great.
Yeah, we won't be putting that much energy into this one.
Gee, maybe we could have a corridor walk.
Oh, God, no.
2 miles.
Well, no,
Well,
way
4
more.
mile round trip.
Speak for
Starting at the
yourself.
top and coming down.
Okay, yeah.
Downhill.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
So with that, we want to move on, and if we can, unless you've got more questions about this one, I think we're.
Do you want
complete.
feedback on the survey that you handed out? Is that what
Sure,
you'd like?
that'd be great.
Okay.
We're going to have to pull that together pretty quickly here, but.
Well, can I follow one other? Was this considered a short survey question? Or is this
No, it's divided. It's
This is the
divided
whole
into
enchilada. You want
topics.
us to narrow it down?
There's
Well-
a lot of repetition in those survey questions. It's broken up by kind of neighborhood and area.
We really, we were kind of on the fence whether to even show it to you because it's very draft. I mean, Jane put it together for us as requested, and we haven't even talked about it since. So she was probably surprised we handed it
Yeah,
out.
I'm a little shocked. Sorry, I apologize.
Thank you very much.
Actually, I'm trying to think of some more questions to put into it, but
There are a lot of questions you could put into it. My problem was how to keep it short. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, there's so much you could ask, but who's going to have time to sit and go
you
through
want
it?
you want a leading question.
Well, there's certainly opportunities for like some open-ended questions. You know, one of the things that John brought up, which would be great, but it's hard to put into into a written format like a questionnaire is. You know, if you could put 500 feet of sidewalk somewhere, where would you put it off of Lynn? You know,
Which is where the paste the dot on a map.
yeah,
comes
like
in.
an open house
Comes in good.
would be a
It's
better
way
format
better,
for something
yeah.
like that.
The other thing is that I understand the technology of putting these questionnaires out is that they can be somewhat directional. As to say, you can ask the question, do you ever ride a bicycle? And if the answer is no, then you can skip a lot of these questions. They just don't even need to appear. So if you don't ride a bicycle at all, you don't have to say, you know, what's your biking destination? Do you bike through this neighborhood? I don't bike anyway, so why should I even have to skip over it? No, I do, but I'm just saying that if the person answering the question can skip over some of those.
Yeah, and you guys have in the city a person that we could work with to put together the questionnaire online. Is that
We're
right?
talking to Lisa about that.
Yeah.
She's our techno wizard on the survey.
Okay. And we could
Survey
certainly
monkey.
we could certainly have it contingent, question answered, and then moves you into a. That's not. I don't think we need to.
Did we really spend an hour and 15 minutes on this item?
Oh yeah.
Oh wow! So we're well
we did
over.
about an hour.
Thanks,
yeah, we
guys.
started.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the time.
Well, thanks for coming.
Sure.
Yeah.
Can we have the board and drawings, or are we?
Yeah, you're welcome to keep it. You want the?
Well, we better take it down, John, because it'll show
Well,
up
we
in another
haven't seen
meeting.
it. I mean,
and
we
raise a
put it
bunch-
up there for what?
You want to study it?
Let's take a look at it at the end of the meeting.
Okay. Okay.
Take it down again.
You can't see it all from here?
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Well, you are having some eye problems, aren't you, buddy?
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
staff report?
Short update on the Myers Road extension. I think I've mentioned this before, but we're looking at a corridor study, different but similar to what we just heard, for Myers Road between Highway 213 and the intersection of Myers Road and High School Lane, so up by the high school. So we have met with the community college and the school district, and well, we asked for proposals from 3 consultants, and we had a meeting and collectively decided to go with David Evans and Associates to put together the corridor study for that piece of work. They worked on Glen Oak Road back when they had a fair amount of stormwater improvements through there, and they were familiar and were on the team that worked with the community college on their master plan update. So that and they're relatively seasoned group, and we've got a lot of stakeholder issues there that we want to work through. So we kind of wanted somebody that was good, that would help us through those things. So we're moving forward with that. We haven't yet put together a final scope or an agreement, but we've also verbally heard from the community college and the school district that they're willing to partner and help pay for that initial corridor study. So that'll be good. Okay. And the annual TAC report. Kathy, what?
Oh, I think, do I have a date on there?
June 4th, is it?
Yeah. That's the next available date for a presentation, so.
Well, it's better at the first part of the month than
Yeah.
middle of the month, because by that time, I'm traveling somewhere in the middle of the month somewhere.
Well, so I'll just send you a reminder.
June
I have a
4th
question
for what?
on that report.
June 4th for what?
The city commission, it's the presentation of your annual report to the
Oh,
city
okay.
commission. So Steve's gonna go to that, and I'll do a staff report, I'll attach the document, and then if they have any questions, or if you wanna go over it.
So they can just, read it. And how you do it?
I don't necessarily think you read it. You probably want to review it and go over the highlights and put together your own. However,
We'll keep
however
it
you want to
short. They
present
probably
it.
want it short anyway.
Yeah, definitely short. Probably 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Bob, you had a question?
Yes, on page 2 of their report, the very last item says continue promoting light rail to Oregon City. I can't recall us discussing light rail here in this TAC.
Not lately.
I
don't think
we did mention.
Go ahead.
I think I mentioned it myself. We talked about it for a brief minute.
But this
The bridge is down now.
This this indicates that we have had a discussion and we agree to promoting it. And that's the way I read it.
Where are you, Bob?
Page 2
Of
That's-
what?
of the
He's on last
Transportation
month's
Advisory
That
Committee
was on
annual
last.
report.
That was on the last.
It may not even be in the packet, I'm sure it is.
It was in the last packet.
It's not in the packet.
I mean, I don't agree with putting that on the report if we haven't had a comprehensive discussion on the subject.
Wait, wasn't this for last year?
Yeah, what we've done last year, yeah.
I've got it too.
We kind of said something, but we just,
Well, we said something, but you can say anything.
we didn't do anything with it.
Yeah. That's my personal opinion.
So, I mean, we could ask, was there a motion that said that we were looking forward to that and supporting that, or not?
No.
If there's no motion, then it's just general discussion. It'd be hard to say that we're quote-unquote supporting them.
Yeah. I'd suggest we remove that part from that report.
Where? I'm not finding it, Kathy.
It was the
Which page?
dated February 3rd, 2014, subject to the Transportation Advisory Committee Annual Report, 2013 draft, and it's the very last item on page 2.
I think, I'm wondering if it did get removed, because now there's a March 13th that was in the last packet from last month.
No, it's in there, continue promoting light rail to Oregon City.
Where at?
Which bullet number is that on?
Page 2, or to page 3.
This is for
Listed as a
2013?
TAC goal for 2014.
We just completed, right.
Right, so that's the report that he's going to be giving is for 2013.
I can't find it. That's page
So-
4.
We need to email our next report.
Continue
Go through it.
promoting light rail to
Yeah.
Oregon City.
Because we still got one more month.
So it's a 2014 TAC goal It's not an accomplishment. We're not necessarily saying it's even a discussion item. I guess we assumed that was maybe that's where this committee's been in the past.
How long ago in the past? It's a whole different committee now.
Yeah, true. I
Do you want to add it to the next agenda or something?
No,
We've
I
already
think
had a
that if-
motion. I mean, it's not, but that doesn't mean we can't change it. It's not going to the city commission until June.
No, I think that now that I've read it more thoroughly, it isn't 2014 TAC goals. It would have to be included in an agenda sometime, which I would prefer in the near future.
Or it could just mean that if it comes up, that the TAC will
We'll attack it at that time.
express their, yeah, will.
Sure. Okay, well, that's fine then. Just leave it as it is, as long as we know that it's a future item, or possibly a future item.
Okay.
I mean, maybe we should have a discussion now if that's something that we wanna talk about in future or support in future. I mean,
Well, we have a place on our agenda to suggest future agenda items, don't we?
We got one more month to yes or no on it.
yeah.
And then June,
So what I'm hearing is we've got a motion to approve these already. That's happened. These the annual report, and because it's listed as 2014 goal, we should sometime this year get that on the agenda for discussion. Okay.
okay. So we are here next. This is the Public Works report, staff report, Metro fact sheet,
And it's all right there.
transportation, ODOT letter.
Wait a minute, we're not there yet.
Oh, we're not, okay.
There's Martin's going to go through a variety of things here, including the
He's
winter
got an
action
agenda.
plan, the Malala Avenue turn lanes at Walgreens, the Malala Avenue crossing at Garden Meadows.
Intentionally.
Items listed on 5B.
Thank you, sir.
Right.
No, we didn't see your name on the list.
These are fresh off the press here. You guys recall, I really need to wait till I get back to a microphone here. Someone's gonna come out from behind the closet and
Can I have a copy?
If you guys recall at our January meeting, actually our February meeting, we advised you what our actions were during the snow event that we had this winter and how we implemented our winter weather plan to kind of address the issues that were associated with that. We were going to give you an update last month, but then, with time constraints, this is the final version of the city's winter weather plan. As I mentioned to you earlier, it kind of outlines our course of actions for each of the various scenarios that we could be facing in terms of winter weather and how we deal with it in terms of road closures, applications of de-icer, anti-icing, and sand and salt. It's basically a form that we're going to be putting out onto the city's webpage as a resource, mainly for people to realize these are the constraints that we operate under, and these are the road closures and expectations that you can have during a declared winter weather event. We also did several other things in terms of implementing our incident management system, with kind of falling in under the Homeland Security guidelines for dealing with a declared emergency. And those are all internal documents that we utilize, but if anybody wants to take a look at them, we can make sure you get a copy of them just as an FYI. So Lisa finished this for us a little while ago. There was a couple of appendices that we added to it. You'll see all the snow routes. You'll see all the road closures. you'll see the school bus routes. So we've gone pretty in-depth in terms of planning for a winter weather event. So that's what I have on the winter action plan. Feel free to review. You'll be the first set of external eyes who's put eyes on it. If you have any comments, feel free and send an email to Lisa, and she'll make whatever amendments you guys have. Additionally, I did check my email here, and I have all of your email addresses listed as having received the email from Lisa. So what we're going to do is double check that you guys all have this, but the email was sent on March 27th at 2:56 p.m. to all of the committee members.
We already sent it again.
Did you? Awesome.
Maybe
So-
it was the subject line of Nigerian opportunity.
No. Yeah, it's TAC March agenda. Lisa had been working for us for like 3 days. I don't think she was going to drop the ball on that one. So,
Yeah, we'll give her a couple weeks.
so Malala, Malala Avenue turn lane at Walgreens and Joanne Fabric. Henry brought this to us, and we did a little due diligence. We went and met with our PD partners and pulled all of the traffic accident data for those intersections for the last several years. Okay, so the two areas in particular, there was Malala Avenue, left-hand turns coming into the Walgreens, potential strikes, T-bone incidences there. We've got a record of one incident of that happening within the last 2-year period. And then the second location was Malala Avenue near the Burgerville. And again, within the data set that we look back, and we look back about 2.5 years, we had another single incident at that location. Based on that information and then all of the other traffic analyses that we have going on and budget constraints, we've made a decision that right now it's not something that we're going to invest money for a full-blown traffic analysis, but we are keeping an eye on it. PD knows that I'm interested in it and John's interested in it. So Chris Wadsworth over there, our contact, anything that happens, she's going to red flag it and send it over, so we'll keep an eye on it. Okay. Garden Meadows. So community spoke to you guys 2 months ago regarding Garden Meadows. Just give you an update. The light for that intersection, that crosswalk, actually, not the intersection. We had a full-blown light analysis conducted by our partners at PGE. They gave us recommendations. The light went up 2 days ago. The crosswalk symbols, the pedestrian crosswalk symbols that you guys had requested, those went up just shortly after the meeting.
Right.
Yep. So those are up. The lights are up. There's actually 2 LED Cobra heads we had installed there to kind of give us a little bit more visibility for the pedestrians crossing across there. And within our restriping program, we typically do that June, July, when we've got good dry weather and we can get some good tack onto that material. That's on the list, so that'll get taken care of at that time. Just want to let you guys know that complaints or issues are brought to you guys, and we do take them seriously and move on them when appropriate. Okay?
That's a good example of, I think, why this committee is one of the most effective in the city. Really, truly.
Thank you, Bob.
Great job.
Radar speed signs. So one of our initiatives that John initiated this year was kind of taking a look at our radar speed sign stock and where we have them located. Wanted to let you know, because this is actually one of your goals for 2014, is kind of coming up with a policy for the city and neighborhoods to invest in traffic control devices where appropriate. So we acquired a new traffic control device this year. It arrived in January, and it's been out at a location in the Kaniba neighborhood for calibration for the last 3 months. That was purchased through a cooperative agreement between Public Works and the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. So they paid to retrofit one of the existing radar signs and have it relocated to another location within the M&A boundaries. And the money that they paid was used to defer the cost of the new radar sign that we have that's going into our rotation cycle. So we have 6 locations throughout the city that we rotate the radar speed signs, and they spend about a quarter of the year at one of those locations, and they just keep moving about. So it's a good example that we're going to start utilizing when neighborhoods approach us saying, hey, we want a radar speed sign here. Like, well, let me show you what the McLaughlin neighborhood is able to accomplish. Some of those are through whatever funding mechanisms the neighborhoods have. Some of those may be grant opportunities that they can seek out, and Public Works will partner with them. Yes, Wayne?
A couple of things.
Sure.
First of all, McLaughlin kind of stands alone financially
I know.
amongst all the neighborhood associations.
And that's why
there.
I mentioned the grant opportunities, and we'll partner
Yep.
with them.
Secondly, is apparently the newest monitors have additional capabilities, such as counting number of vehicles and keeping a record of those, keeping a record of speeds, as well as just flashing to tell the driver what the speed is, but it's also keeping track of it.
That's true.
Yep.
All of ours do.
Yep.
What's the cost on those devices?
$9,700 for a full solar capable unit. The one that we deployed down at the Kanema neighborhood, and it's our preference for when we're going to rotating signs that are moving from one location to another, is for solar powered with a battery backup. If it has to be electrically wired, it is a permanent location.
Wow, so
Ninth and
if you
Washington.
remember, those were about $5,000
No.
maybe 2 years ago. So 97.
$9,700. Now, here's the benefit, though. The ones that we were buying for about $5,700, manufactured and maintained in Georgia. And every time we had a problem, it had to be boxed and shipped and
Get
sent
outta
to
here.
Georgia. Yes. The ones we're buying now are manufactured and serviced in Tualatin.
Yeah!
So if we have problems, we put it in a pickup and we drive it to the other side of town. And they've actually agreed that if we have long-term issues, they'll give us loaners because we're local. So it's a little bit easier.
I like
the
that.
ones that we acquired also technologically have a little bit,
Better.
Everything's advanced.
Yeah.
The data is getting better. To answer your question, yes, they are capable of doing that, and we are pulling some good info from those devices.
I guess another little message that might get lost in there is there was another citizen who asked for some speed control in the Kanema neighborhood. And so Martin and crew have, that's the first place where it went. So, and we pulled down some data that,
Yeah.
I don't know.
A lot of the things that are brought here are brought to us. A lot of it's anecdotal information. And what we observe when we're out there and what a resident observes don't always gist. So these devices do have a data download capability. We do not publicize it, but I guess we just did. We did do a data dump on the one that's been posted in the Kanema district. And it confirms our belief that the speeds in that neighborhood are posted appropriately.
Is that High Street?
It's Fifth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Fifth Avenue.
So McLaughlin has two.
McLaughlin has 3. Yeah. So
And
but
they're funding these
Don't
themselves.
you know the
Not all of
neighborhood
them.
up to the top of the hill?
Not all of them. Not all of them that were funded by the neighborhood. Some of them are long-time signage that have been in the neighborhood. And McLaughlin, to be honest with you, gets probably the most cut-through traffic out of any neighborhood. So,
And the one that was repositioned, that McLaughlin neighborhood paid to have repositioned, is right there on Washington on the downhill side. It was an area where a speed radar sign, just like when you're coming downhill on Lynn, it was a good location to have it relocated to. So they covered the full expense of that. And then what we agreed to is, all right, you'll pay for that relocation. We're going to be purchasing one this year, and we're going to rotate it within your neighborhood. What it does is it frees up one of my rotating ones that I have in stock already to go to other neighborhoods. So it's a win-win for us, and it's a win-win for them.
That one in Washington going downhill, was that permanent?
That's permanent. That's hardwired.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a good location.
97.
Okay. Keeping the agenda rolling here. Sidewalk infill. John, that's you.
so this I think Henry, you brought this up and just how funding for sidewalk infill could happen, and I got to thinking about that and thinking of all the corridor planning that we're doing, the transportation system plan update. All that's kind of based on working on programs to fund sidewalks, bike lanes, those kind of things. So we don't have a specific program to this, but just about everything we do is kind of focused on trying to find ways to apply for grants. That's not to say that we've tapped into all the PTAs, but I guess one example of that is at Gaffney Lane, where Martin met with the school district recently to talk about another area where we did a little concept planning. This is where that, I don't know if you remember on Gaffney Lane, but there's a piece of property there that jets out into the intersection,
I know that
jets
piece.
out into the roadway. You know, is there
Calming device. It's a calming device.
Right. Is there a way that we could make that safer, but also remain a calming device? So, I mean, we do a lot of that. It's just, so I'm not exactly sure if there was something different to that, but I just got to thinking, you know, just about, we've gotten to the point where between Holcomb and Main Street and Leland, Myers, Gaffney Lane, we've got a lot of projects in the queue.
Yes.
I guess the next thing is to match each one of those with a grant application or a community-funded project that would, or I mean, there's other, you know, maybe it's through a PMUF project where we're you know, funding the pavement and we need to fix the sidewalk at the same time, where we're pursuing those. We just need more money, that's all.
Have I heard this story before?
Probably have.
So the infamous 7th and John Adams Ped Crossing, we bought a Ped Crossing device, and then as we started digging into it, and this is, I take full blame, it's much more complex than just putting these in the ground. And 7th Avenue is on Moratorium Road, so I can't really do a road cut there to install it. We brought Wallace Engineering on this month, and there's PSA that's been issued to them, contract, and they'll come up with a full-blown design. This has basically blown itself up into a small capital improvement project. They have 30 days to give us final design, and with that, we'll have a standard that we can utilize for any future PED-activated crossings, which is a tool for our toolbox that we can use, and it'll help us with the future installations. It's within our budget for this year to pay for the design, and then we still have money left over in 2015 for acquiring and installing an additional one.
Somewhere.
We have an idea, a couple locations.
I mean, did you look at just boring under the street? rather
That's
than-
why we have to. That's why I have to come up with a design plan, because the utility conflicts through there are numerous.
They
And
go down
boring is the only option. I can't get a contractor out there to effectively bore without some sort of full-blown design scheme.
There's
Seriously?
a bunch of stuff in that spot.
Yeah. It is very crowded.
We still will have to do
Including
like
a very
locates
large
and
storm pipe.
Yeah, that's already been done. All the
It's
locates,
cheaper
all the
to build a
surveys,
bridge.
everything's been done.
pothole.
Not potholed, because I can't cut the road without having to go back and repave.
Well, how do you know what?
We've got inverts for all of the locations for upstream, downstream.
Oh, okay.
And so we've plotted them out that way.
Okay.
So we have general, as far as locations, because we just came through there with the 7th Avenue project, we know with fairly good confidence from the as-built as to where they are. And then from the inverts on the up and downstream, we know the relative depths. I got to have somebody draw up some plans and say, drill through here.
There's
have to
no
run
fiber
one-
optic or anything like that.
Oh, there's all sorts of stuff.
You have to run 110.
I'm sorry?
You have to run.
Yep. It'll be a 110. There'll be a low volt and a high volt, a 110 and a communications line that both have to be bored, and they have to be independent.
Do it through
Too bad
Bluetooth or
the
something,
communication you
know?
can't put down like you do.
I'm sorry?
No Bluetooth.
The Bluetooth option is for future. We will go with Bluetooth on any future acquisitions. I'll say that.
You can't put control wires like you do when you turn on the street, you know, sense cars. Just,
No.
We gotta
And
have
then
conduits, that's
Yeah.
our main problem. We don't have a raceway for it.
I mean, but like when they do,
You don't have anything metal on you to conduct the loop.
yeah, well, I mean, you could put, you know,
So that's my update on that.
Reno did.
Hopefully next month I'll have a design plan and we will get that rolling. That's all I have.
So the last item is really just an information packet. Most of this went in front of the city commission. So I asked Kathy if we could just insert it. First of all, Metro's got really a good survey that talks about a variety of things, but it's really their website, makeagreatplace.org, is a good way to share your thoughts on what you think about these density concerns or biking and walking solutions versus building bigger freeways, those kind of things. So take a look at that survey, and I think it'd be a good opportunity it is a good opportunity to provide our Metro regional government with some thoughts on what some of their Metro regional planning means for Oregon City. And then there's this Transportation for America, which is just it didn't quite print right. I don't,
Yeah, it's cool.
But I'm not. So really, I wanted to provide this because it's really talking about one proposal, not the only proposal, but one proposal which would add 17 cents per gallon to the federal gas tax. And that's been met with kind of some mixed emotions. Everybody agrees that transportation funding is not basically the federal Transportation Funding Act is essentially going to go broke unless they do something different there, and they haven't raised the federal gas tax in a number of years. So that information is advocating for that particular solution. I think they've softened a little bit on the proposed solutions. The state and the region is not sure that that's the right solution either, but they just know that more transportation funding is needed. And actually, there's a really, really good letter written by Matt Garrett from ODOT. He's the director of ODOT and Department of Transportation, and he sent a letter to Congressman Walden, and he's done really the best job I've seen articulating how those funding shortfalls will affect or could affect Oregon. And he's even included some of the projects that, if you remember, one of the grants that we didn't get was the STIPS grant. We had applied for two projects, Main Street and then Molalla. And in that run, we actually pulled the Molalla project because they asked us right out. They had so many requests for funding that they asked us to, if we had more than one project, which was our priority. So we pulled the Molalla project and pursued getting funding for Main Street improvements from 10th to 15th. That one didn't make the short list. So the only project that made the short list was a project that was focused on the 99E tunnel, railroad tunnel, and improving lighting there. And I think we're hoping to stretch that even into some advanced warning lighting on 99E. So anyway, but that's one of the projects that could get cut if we don't see some new revenue from the federal government. So I thought it'd be interesting for you to know that conversation's going on in the region, and elected officials, mayors, and commissioners are talking about it through the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee. So,
So John, is this going to be? Are we going to get something printed correctly?
I'm not sure
Go
what
online and get it.
I'm not sure what happened there, but if you go to the online, the digital packet,
Okay.
it's correct there.
Got it. Okay.
So hopefully that'll suffice.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm for a mileage tax on cars,
And motorcycles.
You mean like other?
like
You
electric
mean
cars.
now that you're semi-retired?
Yeah, I only drive less than 10,000 miles a year, but I got a gas guy that does our sitting on.
What I know, New Zealand, for example, has a fee that every 10,000 kilometers you got to go in and buy a stamp to show you're legal to use on the road.
Well, go for that.
That's only 6,100 miles.
What's this? Does city have a specific, like a gas tax or?
No, the city doesn't have one. We considered it when we were looking at the pavement maintenance utility fee, and it was determined that, unless it's a regional tax, people tend to avoid your local gas stations, and it really only kind of hurts the local guy. So, we get money from gas taxes through the state. So the state sets the gas tax limit, and that actually has not been raised either. So there is some question about, do we make this federal increase, or should it be a state increase, or something different? But so the state charges gas tax. They allocate that based on population to the local agencies.
So,
We
so what
don't
is
have
city?
it. We have a pavement maintenance utility fee. So the people within the city limits of Oregon City, businesses and residential users pay the fee on their utility bill. So for residential users, I think right now it's $12.56 per month.
So basically, the gas taxes that we receive pay for staff in our street department, and that include anything with regard to striping, signage, speed signage, anything that the street department takes on, internal paving, that we do in our own little paving program, and the PMUF is more focused on the contract pavement maintenance, slurry seals. We'll put together an annual contract this year for rehab streets, milling, paving, those kind of things.
That's why I say mileage tax, right?
And that's coming up next on the agenda here, right?
Yes, it is.
Just before we get off of this, and I was kind of hoping to have this under suggested future items.
Sure.
But if I may bring this up now, at last Clackamas County Business Alliance meeting, they had a presentation from the county about what the county is planning on doing with roads. And it was a very, very good presentation, and I talked to them and asked them if they would be interested in coming and make a presentation to TAC, and they would love to come and get the cities aware of what the counties are planning on doing, because they're having, of course, funding issues about how they're going to be able to maintain all the county roads that they have. And I don't know if this group is interested in finding out what the county is planning on doing, but I would think that they would be.
Because there's a
Do
lot
we
of
have any
county
county-
roads that feed into the city, so.
Exactly. So
Do we have county roads going through the city, or do they stop?
We do have a few county roads.
Beaver Creek and
South End Hill
South
is
End
a
Road,
county
yeah.
road. Abernathy is a county road.
Redland?
Holcomb,
Well, Redland is, yes, Redland's a county road.
Holcomb,
Holcomb is city road.
Forsyth.
we just
Forsyth
bought
is
Holcomb,
county.
didn't we?
Yeah.
Say that again.
Didn't county just give us Holcomb after they
Right.
brought it up to city standards?
They brought it up to the standard.
They brought it up to something. I don't know.
Something.
Yeah, well,
Forsyth is
Chip
still-
seal is not really.
yeah.
But yeah.
In
Yeah,
any,
so
in
there
any
are a
event,
few.
so the question is, should we have the county come and make that presentation to us? And
Yeah, we
you
can
want me
do
to get a
that.
name to you?
Is that Mike Besner? I think it is Mike.
No, it was a woman, and I got her
I
card.
think
at
the
home.
director is Mike Besner, so we'll talk. We'll
Thank
see
you.
if we can't get that.
Okay, let's
Schedule.
move on here. Where are we at? I guess construction summary?
Summer construction.
Yeah. Summer construction.
You got good notes on that, so I don't have to.
I don't know that a whole lot is needed.
Back
It,
of
it,
the whole list of it.
there's a
Map.
list. Two of the projects are mostly pavement maintenance utility fee funded. Project 1, Project 2. Project 1 went out to bid today, or advertises tomorrow. Project number 2, that's I think about $1 million project. That's the reconstruction part, and that's still in design. Project 3, the Claremont Way water line and roadway reconstruction. That's the other half of Claremont Way. We did phase 1 last year, and this is phase 2, so it'll complete it from right around Hellendale Park all the way to Myers Road. And that is already out to bid. The bid is scheduled to open April 22nd. And then, as some people were discussing before the meeting started, the McLaughlin Boulevard project is underway, and Firestone Alley is temporarily closed. But that's another project we have underway. And the last one is a grant and some other funding thrown in, like urban renewal. Claremont Way is is the pavement maintenance utility fee and the water fund, because we're replacing the water line and then paving it. So I have one map in there. It's not real easy to read, but I think I'll also have some of these maps online. And this is just shows what the slurry and microseals are going to be this year. Is this map? It's called Sheet 1, 2014, Oregon City Pavement or Preventive Pavement Maintenance.
Perhaps you could refresh the memory. What's a micro seal and how does that differ from a slurry seal?
So microseal is it's similar. It's got heavier media in it. So even the slurry seal has sand and rock chips in it. And, microseal is got a little heavier media, so it goes down thicker. It wears longer. Also sets off quicker, so it cures. It cures in 1 to 2 hours.
Yeah, you can drive on it by the end of the day's
Is that what you did on First Street a couple years ago?
Yes.
First Street we use microseal. And so this will be our second application of that. And we're putting it on Beaver Creek Road for one, because we want to be able to put traffic on it pretty quickly. And two, because Beaver Creek Road and that section in front of the county gets a lot of traffic.
It lasts longer than that?
It will last longer than the slurry seal.
There's a cost ratio, it is more expensive. But. So that's just.
Thank you, Kathy. That was good.
Good.
And we're putting all that in the Trail News.
Good. Communications.
I have an item.
Go ahead.
The Oak Tree Terrace intersection with Whitkey Way, we've talked about that. And were you aware that, I think
is that the little private road?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
I think the new owner may have put up a
the
cable there.
He put a
That
cable
wasn't-
right across
Was
the-
that city or her?
That's the owner's prerogative.
That's what she
Yeah.
put something up there. It's pretty
It's a
effective.
he, actually.
Oh, it's a he?
Yeah,
I
it's
thought it was a she.
it
Well-
looks like a female name, but it's actually a he.
Well, the person.
Yeah, we had a sign posted there, and we put up a private road sign.
Yeah.
So everyone's aware that it is a private road, and then if anyone's out there trespassing, we advised him come up with the means to, minimize the intrusion back there, and then post it for no trespassing so that PD can go and enforce it. And we've actually spoken to PD, and they put it, on their list of areas to keep an eye on.
Yeah, he put a sign up there that says construction in progress.
Okay.
Extreme danger or something. I mean, he did a pretty good job on it.
Yeah.
And then I just wanted to remind everybody about April 26th, the citywide cleanup.
Oh, the Solve Day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
We are very heavily invested in Solve Day. You want to talk about it?
Go ahead.
We've got 2 sites that Public Works in particular is sponsoring. We're working in conjunction with our Parks and Recreation Department, and even the city manager's office is heavily involved. We're doing a family-friendly site at Wesley Lynn Park. There's an old retention pond out there that essentially it's been denuded over years. So we're going to do a replanting out there. One of our guys that's really good with our vegetation planting came up with a great planting scheme. We actually met on site today to discuss irrigation options and all of the planting work and everything prepping up for the 26th. And then our site that we do repetitive, kind of like our annual work location over on Singer Hill, is another one of the sites where we're going to send primarily adults to that location. It's not really family friendly. And we'll be removing some invasive species, doing some minor planting there, and then the city will come back in a few days after the work's completed, and we'll be putting in some bark dust and just some mulch control, weed control in there.
Well, as long as we're advertising locations.
Yeah,
Park,
and that's
Park
really,
Place Neighborhood Association is doing the Forsyth Road and Clackamas River Drive locations, so everybody out there in TV land is invited.
Forsyth and Clackamas, don't you guys usually do the Redland and Holcomb?
Yeah, but we've decided to do that one. It's over there by the heating company, and it's really in bad shape. we had one of our members spray the location at Redland and Holcomb.
Are you coordinating with Nancy Bush for the overall event, letting her know your locations? Because I didn't see those.
Yeah,
on-
the Van Haverbeeks they take care of that every year
Okay.
for us. They've been very active in that for a long time.
I have to verify because Nancy publishes a list. All the volunteers, she kind of coordinates them and corrals them.
Right.
And gives
She's
them-
got them listed as
Okay,
the
she
captains or
does.
whatever they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, try not to steal too many of your volunteers.
You go out there with the whip.
And if they finish
Or
up
the whip.
early, I'll send them your way.
I'm just a worker on that one. I'm not in charge of anything.
Okay?
I had, this is communications?
Yeah, some communications.
Just for what it's worth, maybe nothing, but I've been appointed with the Metro's PERC, P-E-R-C, which is the Public Engagement Resource Committee, some acronym like that. And what they're doing is they're trying to see how effective they are at getting their communications out to the public. So some of this stuff, I guess that's sort of going to be under their purview. I haven't met with them yet, but I guess we'll be just a couple times a year. So if there's something about Metro's communications to the city that could be improved, I'd love to hear about it.
Okay? Anything else? Future agenda items. You had one. Anybody else?
Future agenda.
We've already discussed that light rail, or not light rail, but Amtrak, railroad transportation.
Yeah, we had that.
Okay, so that's going to go on the agenda.
It's on the plan.
Because I think that is really, really important. I think the state's heavily involved in that. And they're talking about either the east side or the west side of the river. The east side coming through Oregon City, and we want to keep it through Oregon City.
The west side one was going to hit Oregon City too, but only in like for 10 feet.
Yeah, they'll push oil trains down there next.
Yeah. Well, I think that railroad transportation is going to have be affected by the Blue Heron site, the legacy
Oh,
site.
the red line, green line.
Well, there's another issue with that, and that is the establishment of a quiet zone in the downtown area, which is, I don't know if we're involved in that or not, but I know that there's discussions about creating a quiet zone. Basically meaning that they can't blow their whistles as they come rumbling through.
They can't nail Dutch Brothers there?
Get your cup of coffee.
You know, it's been a couple of years since we've nailed anybody on the railroad tracks down there.
Oh, there was one not too
Knock
long.
on wood.
I thought there was one not too long ago.
Nice sentiment there, Henry.
John, how's that coming with the Dutch Brothers geometry of the turn
bring it up.
and no turn and hop, skip, and a jump?
Well, I think they've heard that we're planning to come talk to them, but we haven't come talk to them. But I do notice that they're pretty regular at having employees out in their driveway to take orders so they can move them through. But I still hear complaints about the fact that they're out, people wanting to make that left turn as they're coming up 10th. But if you remember our solutions, we're going to have some requirements that we spend some capital there, and I really don't have the budget for that right now. So Martin and I have talked a little bit about how approach to Dutch Brothers to let them know what we're thinking, but we haven't had the conversation yet.
Put a curb right up the middle.
While we're bringing up old wounds, you guys brought up Holcomb and Redland, the turn as you're coming downhill. One of the projects that
The lane alignment.
Yeah, the lane alignments there, and then the signal head alignments. That's one of the projects for this summer's big PMUF projects, and we'll be realigning the lanes through there. I'm working on some improvements, including turning the exterior lane as a right turn only, and then a single through lane, and then a dedicated left turn. So that should help alleviate a lot of the problems that you guys have mentioned at that location. And with that, because the intersection is technically the county's, they'll be working with the signal heads and realigning those accordingly.
We did already make some adjustments, but we're going to pave that little piece between the bridge on Holcomb down to the intersection.
Yeah.
And we're going to try and make that a little bit wider to accommodate
Pedestrians and bikes.
a wider shoulder, and yeah, bike lane, if you will. I'm reluctant to call it a full bike lane, but it's a wider shoulder there.
There's no
And-
way to construct a sidewalk on that one side.
Well, there may be, but it's back to we don't have the funding for something like that. So
And the money.
we're gonna do the best we can with our pavement maintenance fees, and restriping and realigning the signal heads will be a good improvement there. And the county's bought off on that idea, right?
Gabe has spoken to Wallace and, Gabe has spoken to the county and they're
Good.
good with it. So I actually have it on my notes to follow up with Gabe tomorrow to see if I'll be meeting with him. But I spoke with Bikram and I spoke with Christian about this a few months ago.
Which is the county.
Yep.
Okay. Any other future agenda items? It's 8:00. Let's adjourn this place.
Thank you.